Hey, this is Zeno in with you in the Fight Back, and this is going to be the concluding video on revolutionaries and military organization. I realized initially after I initially announced this brief series on revolutionaries and military organization that I kind of set a little too much than I could handle. I was going to talk about all these different groups and how they contribute, but so I pretty much did in the first video about the Spanish Civil War, militias versus centralized army. The second video dealt with a guerrilla army slash popular army, regular army of the People's Liberation Army in China. And I do want to address this third one, which is terrorism. And I just want to say up front, anyone who actually thinks that revolutionary Marxists have anything in common with, say, the Al-Qaeda brand of terrorism needs to seriously have your head examined. And originally was going to look at, say, the Irish Republican Army, but I didn't really have the time to do a lot of research on this right now. But I did find some articles by Trotsky on terrorism, and he's more addressing the anarchist propaganda by deed that was existing in Russia at the time. And this is around, he wrote these articles around 1909, 1911. But a lot of what he says is quite relevant, I believe. And I think when Trotsky's reasons for revolutionaries rejecting terrorist organizations or terrorist tactics are quite useful for today. And Trotsky looks at the terror that removes the minister after minister in Russia. So when the revolutionaries kill the Tsar, for instance, another Tsar takes its place, and they try and kill that Tsar too. Now, this, in a sense, just targets the Tsar's bureaucracy, or the bureaucracy of the capitalist state, as it were. And the Russia's terrorists, they're very much influenced by events in the West, or Western capitalist societies. And the terrorists see the Russian state as self-contained, cut off from the organization of the society. Yet the state is very much grounded in society, whether this is the Russian Tsarist state or the capitalist state. But in Russia, a society that is developing capitalism, especially towards the end of the 19th century, and Tsarism is helping capitalism develop in Russia because they're, in a sense, in competition with Western powers. And Tsarism, its development of modern capitalist methods, seems to raise it above society. And thus the terrorists think because the state is above society that they can just blow it apart because it's not grounded in society and everything crumbles and we have the glorious tomorrow. Yet, capitalist development by necessity entails the creation of a proletariat, and this will become important momentarily. And by its nature, though, terrorism demands secrecy, conspiracy, and it does not really entail agitation and organization among the masses, among the proletariat. And that's very much essential to any Marxist program. And for the terrorists, there really only exists their organization and the state. It may be a little simplistic, but I believe Trotsky's point is taken here. And terrorism is not connected to the revolutionary class. It's not really connected to the class struggle. It's something outside of it, something past it. It lacks faith in the masses. They're just kind of putting their faith in guns and bombs, as it were. But terrorism only supports its existence by exploiting the weaknesses of the masses. In a revolution, there is mass struggle, political organization, and terrorists, again, just see bombs and guns. And the rule now, when we use terrorism, we Marxists recognize something, that the ruling class, and Trotsky makes this point, they complain about terrorism from the left. They always do, or subversion, or disruptive tactics, but you get the point. And their meaning is, of course, not always clear. They tend to brand these acts of workers in defense of their interests as terrorists, like strikes, boycotts, and demonstrations. And for instance, the ruling class, if you remember just a few years ago when the 2008 election was occurring, a lot of supposed connections were coming out about Barack Obama's connections to the Weather Underground and Bill Ayers, and we have the ruling class decrying Bill Ayers as a terrorist, the Weather Underground. Now, I'm not a big fan of the Weather Underground and Bill Ayers, but it's really damn right hypocritical, and this is something Trotsky points out as well. To the class enemy, the workers' struggle is, in a sense, terrorist to them, but they ignore that whole state apparatus. The whole capitalist state apparatus is nothing other than capitalist terror, and they have no moral indignation toward it. So, back to the Weather Underground. Yes, the Weather Underground set off bombs and they did stuff, but the same people who tend to condemn the Weather Underground, I'm talking more conservatives or liberals, they tend to have nothing to say about capitalist terror. And what do I mean by capitalist terror? How about the genocide perpetrated by the United States upon Indochina? Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos. Not really a peep there. I tend to see. And Trotsky again emphasizes this important point that the revolutions are made by the masses, by classes in motion. And terrorism can throw the ruling class into confusion. For instance, when the terrorists kill the Tsar, yeah, it throws them into confusion. But it's really a short duration. The capitalist class can replace its leaders and ministers. It doesn't necessarily depend upon them. And again, the terrorists rely on guns and bombs and assassination, yet they ignore the class struggle. They ignore organization, parties, mass agitation, and mass action. These are essential if we're going to win. And terrorism, in a sense, even lowers political consciousness of the masses. It directs them away from their collective efforts, from their collective struggle against parties, organizations, and all that, and it makes them look kind of almost to the terrorists, as it were, as avenging savior, someone who's going to save you, the man on the white horse, if you want. And we shouldn't be encouraging this type of thing, but we should be encouraging collective action, collective struggle. And terrorism, Trotsky points out, can be an act of revenge. It's almost a psychological source of terrorism. Again, he's looking at Russia at this point in history. And he points to labor strikes in, say, the U.S. and Europe, and anarchists in many cases would flare up after, say, a particular massacre of the workers. And they would, assassinate a figure of capitalist oppression. And we have the capitalists on the one hand, they're touting respect for human life. We see that then, and of course we see it now, while they shoot workers in the name of the sacred rights of property. They're a bunch of hypocritical bastards. But when workers are hungry, they're jobless, and they demand arms, we have the capitalists on the other hand saying, well, violence is wrong. You can't do that. And the proletariat, yeah, they have a sense of revenge for the wrongs that have been committed upon them. And Trotsky's not saying that sense of revenge should actually be encouraged, it should be aroused, but it should be directed against the system. You see the whole class structure, not a single individual, not a single minister or state official, but you should see the whole system as the enemy. And you need a collective struggle. That is how we get revenge, that's how we get justice, and that's how we get the revolution. And I really think what Trotsky's saying is terrorism is pretty much divorced from the masses, divorced from the mass struggle. But what we need is the mass struggle, collective action, and collective revolution of self-emancipation. So that's concluding Revolutionaries and Military Organization. Until next time.